This is the High Stakes Lowdown, a RotoViz podcast brought to you by the Fantasy Football Players Championship. I'm Eric Balkman from the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, the Better Sports Network, and the FFPC. You can connect with me on X at Eric Balkman and the FFPC on X at FFPC. Before we get into the show, I want to remind everyone that you can get a listeners-only 10% discount to RotoViz by using the code RVRadio2025. That's RVRadio 2025. Your subscription gives you unlimited access to all of the RotoViz content and tools, and it supports the podcast channel as well. Now, without further ado, here's the latest episode of the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown. Welcome into October 7th, 2025, as we enter week 6 of the 2025 NFL football season. Hi, hello, and welcome. It's the latest edition of the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown. My name is Eric Balkman at Eric Balkman on X. Of course, you know me from the Better Sports Network, the Fantasy Football Players Championship, and the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour. Shout out to the FFPC, the Fantasy Football Players Championship, the home of high stakes fantasy football, and the home of the FFPC Weekly Challenge. If you thought that it was just season long with the FFPC, yeah, we're pretty good at that. But we also have the Weekly Challenge, which is off and running right now for both Thursday and Sunday games this week. There's no draft in this. There's no salary cap. There's nothing of the sort. You just pick 10 players. If you like playing with kickers and defenses, we have those for you as well. And then you pick 12 players. Only one player per NFL team. So if you want Bo Nix, you can't have Cortland Sutton. If you want Justin Fields, you can't have Garrett Wilson. You can win up to $2,500 every week in the FFPC Weekly Challenge. Play in 10, 30, or 100-team formats. MyFFPC.com is where to go for that. MyFFPC.com. Remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, comment on the video, share it with your friends, share it with your enemies, and get notified each and every time we go live, which will be Thursday at 7 p.m. More to come on that later on in the show. Without further ado, let's get into tonight's episode. The gentleman I'm going to bring on has done this show before. He's been on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour before. I see him out in Las Vegas every single year when he's competing in the FFPC Main Event for $1 million, or in the FFPC Varsity contest, one of the many high stakes leagues we have out there, a $3,000 entry contest, total points format. And this dude has won it twice, and he's got his sights set on a $1 million grand prize in the FFPC Main Event this year. Without further ado, please welcome back onto the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown, Mr. Larry Weinhauer. Larry, welcome in.
Thank you. How's it going tonight?
It's going good. How's the season treating you so far? I know you have a team in the top 130, but last week you had one really high up there.
Yeah, I looked today. I think it's at 31.
Oh, nice. So it's in the top 40 still. That's excellent.
Yeah. Yep. Well, it's going well. I think overall the injuries, like is affecting everyone, have been a little bit crazy. So trying to dodge those, but for the most part, it seems like it's going pretty well.
Do you feel, and I get this question every year, and I guess I don't notice it, or maybe I'm just immune to it. Maybe I don't notice it anymore. Do you feel like there's more injuries this year, Larry, than normal? I just feel like this time of year, it always just seems to hit hard, and I'm just used to it at this point. Do you feel like there's more injuries to more prolific, big-time playmakers so far?
It sure seems like there are. And I realize too, and you're right, it does happen every year, and I think we tend to forget from time to time, but boy, it sure seems like there's a lot this year. They just keep dropping, and you just keep your fingers crossed, and hopefully it's not any of your major guys, or not for an extended period of time, I guess.
I always think too, and this is how, just years of fantasy football has changed me is, I get upset when one of my players goes down. But for me now, Larry, I'm looking at it from the standpoint of, I know my players are going to go down. It just happens. Now I'm more excited about the opportunity it brings up for the guys behind him on my bench. The Michael Carters to my Trey Bensons, the Hassan Haskins to my Omarion Hamptons. And so stuff like that gets me, or Kamani Vidal, whatever. And we'll talk about that later on in the show. Right. But it gets me more excited for that, because this is when, league winners can kind of develop. These guys that have to step in for these players that we drafted in round 3 or round 5 that all of a sudden have a pathway to top 10 at their position potential, and players we drafted in the mid rounds. And I feel like that's not only the way I look at it, I think that's a healthy way to look at it from a high stakes fantasy football standpoint.
I agree. I think it is too. And it's, and I get upset as well when one of my players goes down, but you do have to realize that it's going to happen. It's part of the game that we play. So I do think it's important. I've always been a fan of handcuffs when it's appropriate, if there is a clear handcuff. And, I think this year, like many of the others, it certainly will pay off if you have some of your stars handcuffed a bit.
Yeah, Tom Smith, our good buddy, chiming in right now. The latest, Brenton Strange to IR. This happened earlier this afternoon. Missing at least 4 games with a hip injury. Had a 22-yard catch last night against the Chiefs, and he's been really, really good over the course of the season. Hunter Long had never played in more than 22 snaps in a game so far this year until last night when he got up to 35 snaps. I don't know if he's going to be fantasy football worthy, but Larry, when you think about Strange going on IR, you never root for injuries, but maybe this is the tonic that Brian Thomas needed. Maybe this is the panacea that Travis Hunter is looking for, with no Strange for Trevor Lawrence to fall back on. I wonder if we see a bump in production from Thomas and perhaps Travis Hunter as well.
I wouldn't be surprised. I think it's been just a matter of time with Thomas. I mean, he's just too talented, and he obviously hasn't done anything this year to speak of. But I think, as time goes on, I think he'll come back on track. And it also, with Strange being out, I don't know how much, the new tight end will step in, but it also creates, I was actually a person that was rather high on Diami Brown before he banged up his shoulder. He was starting to actually had some games where he was their wide receiver 1, and thinking that he, could fill in. Parker Washington kind of stepped up in when he was hurt. So one of those, it might be an opportunity for one of those guys as well as a third receiver to step in and take some of those passes, because Strange certainly was looking good. That's very unfortunate for sure.
Diami Brown on a lot of my best ball teams. Certainly, I was of the same mind as you in the drafting season. And unfortunately, I have a lot of George Kittle, Brenton Strange teams. So I have some work to do on waivers tomorrow to try to figure out the tight end position. Speaking of the tight ends, Larry, I want to talk about the Dallas Cowboys here. You are a Cowboys guy. Many players who have played against you know your team as Troy's boys in the FFPC. Jake Ferguson is a player that you got on a few of your FFPC teams this year. And I'm kind of curious, as we look at him right now and get your take on this. Through 5 games, he's got 41 catches. He's up to 272 yards and 3 touchdowns on the year. Now, I'm not saying he's going to keep this up over a 17-game season, but he's well on his way as far as pace goes. To a 130 catch, 1,000-yard season and double-digit touchdowns. Is there any reason to believe that this guy is not going to be significant, that is not going to be one of the best tight ends in the league, that is not going to keep this up? Theo Greminger from Fantasy Points said earlier yesterday on one of his podcasts that he believes Ferguson is a dark horse to be the tight end 1 this year, over George Kittle, who's on IR, over Brock Bowers, who's dealing with a knee injury, over Trey McBride, who's dealing with a Kyler Murray problem. So you have all those guys seemingly taking a back seat to Ferguson so far this year. This has been a treat to watch, not only Ferguson, but this Cowboys offense in general, Larry.
It has. I'm a huge Ferguson fan. I think it's going to continue. I think the big concern is when CD comes back, is his target share going to go down at that point? He actually had 18 targets, I think it was, in the first 2 weeks when Lamb was playing. So I don't see a huge drop off in his production. I think the one area he's had 3 touchdowns the last 2 weeks. He's never really been a huge touchdown guy. So I don't know that will stay consistent. There's probably going to be some regression there, but I think Dak loves him. He's a security blanket. And I think speaking of CD, on the other hand, I think that can open up the field even more for him when Lamb comes back and draws more attention, especially on the outside. And so I think Ferguson is going to remain solid. I would agree. I think, tight end 1 would be tough, but I don't think Theo's far off with that. And, I think he's going to continue to produce, maybe not quite as many touchdowns, but I think the targets and receptions are going to be there.
targets and receptions for sure. Definitely with you on that. I think Lamb and him are complementary players. Where when both of them are out there, I just think they accentuate the other one because they do different things for that Cowboys offense. Looking at FFPC scoring right now, the tight end one in fantasy football at the moment is one Jake Ferguson, and he is nearly 30 points ahead of the number 2 tight end in Tyler Warren, a huge, deep, yawning chasm between number 1 and number 2. And if we look at the tight ends this year, man, I just – you like the top 10, I'll just read them off here. Ferguson and Warren, which obviously those two were not drafted, 1 and 2 as far as tight ends go. McBride's 3. Dalton Kincaid is tight end 4. Then you get Kelsey, then Hunter Henry after that, Sam Laporta, Jawan Johnson, and for God's sake, save us all, Jake Tonjes is number 9 on this list before we get into Dallas Goedert. Jake Tonjes, who has 63 fantasy points on the season in the FFPC through 5 games. Unbelievable stuff. And I guess maybe the lesson in that, Larry, is like, hey, if you want to go after an elite tight end, that's fine. But maybe take some shots on these mid-round tight ends. And I know it's only 5 weeks into the season, but some of these guys are going to keep this up. Ferguson, we just mentioned, is one of them.
Yep, I have never been a big proponent of taking that first round tight end just because with it being a one spot position, if they do go down, of course, the one league that I did decide to do it in this year, I took George Kittle, and and it's just killing me. And it's actually one of the varsity teams, and I don't know how it's happened, but I've actually hung on. I think I'm within like 3 points of first place, hanging in there still. But 2 of my top 4 picks were George Kittle and Joe Burrow.
My God. The fact that you're hanging on means you definitely drafted well.
Well, that are extremely lucky.
Extremely lucky.
One of them probably a combination, but hopefully, with a waiver wire and trying to fill in some spots, hopefully we can keep it chugging along. But I figured that team was pretty much sunk because they both went down so early, and they're hanging in. So we'll try to keep rebuilding and replenishing and hope that it continues.
Yeah, and you may only need be without George Kittle for 1 more week too, which is obviously good to get him back for the second half of the fantasy season for sure. A guy who got off to a slow start in the first half of the fantasy season was Calvin Ridley. Through his first 4 weeks, 4 for 27, 3 for 57, 1 for 27, 2 for 30, and then against Arizona this week, he sees a season high in targets in 10. Cam Warden, he connect 5 times for 131 yards, doesn't get in the end zone. And this was the game that Ridley drafters were waiting for. He gets the Raiders this week after breaking out in week 5. Larry, how trustworthy is Calvin Ridley in your starting lineup this week? Again, only 2 teams on bye in week 6 with the Vikings and Texans, but we saw the potential with Ridley and Ward last week. Is Ridley a guy that you would strongly consider starting in week 6, even after just 1 good week on the season so far?
Well, as far as being trustworthy, for me, not much. I loved Calvin Ridley. I was taking him anywhere I could get him in the 5th round in the drafts this year. I did end up getting him, I think on two of the teams that I have in the FFPC. And of course, last week was the first week I sat him down. He's just, a couple points a week. And I had some other choices. I'm like, I'm going to set him down for a week or 2. And here he goes. So, who knows? I'm a wreck about this week. I'm probably going to put him back in at least one of them this week. But it's just as far as being trustworthy, but playing against that Las Vegas defense. I mean, I think you almost have to give him a shot. The one thing that I did look at is because I've had him for a couple years. Last year, he only had 1 decent game in the first 7 games. I think it was 1 double-digit game, and everything else was horrible. And then from week 8 on last year, he had double-digit fantasy points in 8 out of 11 games. And the 3, I actually double-checked this, the 3 weeks that he didn't, he scored 9.8, 9, and 6.5. So he really took off after a horrible start last year. And I'm hopeful that maybe he'll do that again. But as far as being trustworthy, I'm not there at all with him yet, but cautiously optimistic, I guess.
I think Chris Vaccaro was talking about this on the Fantasy Empire podcast last week. He said Ridley needs the rod on your bench until he comes through with the back-to-back good games, and then you can look at starting him, which is kind of where I'm at. It's tough. Like I can't remember who I was talking to about this, but I said in a lot of leagues this year, normally I go fairly wide receiver heavy to start, and I didn't as much this year because I knew there was that little pocket of Calvin Ridley, of George Pickens, and of Jameson Williams that I could usually get one of those guys in every draft, sort of as like a wide receiver 3 or in some cases a wide receiver 4. And so far, really only one of those guys has hit. Like we're still waiting on Jameson Williams and still waiting on Ridley for the most part. Pickens has already proven himself, and he's looking good. So again, we'll see what happens with Ridley, but very encouraging signs, at least in week 5. Going forward here. Speaking of the receivers, want to go to San Francisco. Last week, it was why we watched football on Thursday night. The Niners were without Brock Purdy, George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, Jawan Jennings, Ricky Pearsall. They're missing some defenders as well. They go into Los Angeles as a touchdown plus underdog, and they come away with the victory, of course, like we just thought that they were. Now, part of the reason they came up with that big win was Kendrick Bourne, who had I think it was 10 for 142 or something like that. The Brock Purdy needed to throw to somebody, and he hit Bourne, and he hit him a lot last week, despite DeMarcus Robinson actually out snapping and out routing him on the on passing routes. But Bourne's an interesting guy. I know you have him in a couple of spots. He's on the waiver wire in a lot of spots in the FFPC. In fact, I'll bring this up right now, courtesy of Fantasy Mojo, fantasymojo.com. Anytime we bring up tournament ownership percentages, it's courtesy of Darren Armani, the godfather of the FFPC Pros versus Joes. If you're playing in the FFPC, check out fantasymojo.com. Kendrick Bourne is owned in 19% of main event leagues. He is owned in 13% of big gorilla leagues. So he's out there a lot. This is weird though. Like, what do you do? Because assuming Ricky Pearsall and Jawan Jennings come back against Tampa this week, I get that you kind of want to acquire Bourne, but I wonder if you're just throwing fab dollars to waste, because not only are Pearsall and Jennings having, not only are they going to have a great shot to come back in week 6, you got George Kittle coming back probably in week 7 as well, Larry. Kendrick Bourne's a weird guy on the waiver wire this week.
He is. It is a difficult one. Luckily, I picked him up in 2 leagues last week and played him in one. I wish I'd have played him in the other. Nice.
That's awesome. Were you forced? Did you have like bye week or injury issues that you were playing Bourne?
I had a little bit of injury issue in the one that I played him, but okay. I liked him. I really liked just being stripped as much as they were of all of their pass catchers. I liked his connection with Mac Jones from back in New England. And I thought if someone stepped up, he would be one that would have a good opportunity to do that. So that's why I did throw him in for I think it might even been the league where I've got CeeDee Lamb or somebody, maybe Drake London, who was off. Someone I plugged him in. But I agree. I think if those guys are healthy, I think Pearsall and Jennings go right back to their positions. Kittle in another week. I do think with that performance that Bourne will hang on to the number 3 job. I think that was kind of up in the air with DeMarcus Robinson and a couple of the other ones that they had. So I think he'll be the number 3, but with everybody coming back, I could still see carrying him for depth, but I think he's a 3 to 8%er. Not and I'm sure somebody after last week, some leagues, there'll be people that blow up and shoot probably a couple $100 on them. I wouldn't do that at this point, just because I do think he's gonna fall back into kind of a third wide receiver role as these other guys come back.
There is value in it, and there are players that I like doing this with on the waiver wire. If you are not dealing with injuries in week 6, again, I mentioned it at the top of the show. We don't have 6 teams on bye. We don't have 4 teams on bye. We just have 2 teams on bye this week. So if you have that extra spot to play around with, certainly you could look at streaming a defense in week 7 if you want to look ahead to week 7, maybe pick somebody up there before everybody else gets after him in week 6. But I think Bourne is interesting given the fact that Kittle, Pearsall, and Jennings have all dealt with injury issues this year, and if even one of them was to go down, I think Bourne makes for an interesting flex, especially if Mac Jones is the quarterback. Like, we don't know. This is already a setback for Brock Purdy with this toe, and toes are tricky too. We know that Mac Jones has eyes for Kendrick Bourne. So I think that's the type of approach I'll be doing too, Larry, when I place my bids. Is not going to, a lot of keep it honest bids. And if I get Bourne, I'll see what happens with it, because there clearly is something there with him and Jones.
I think he's one that's worth a hold if you get him, and then you don't need to drop him, for bye weeks and whatnot, because like you said, I mean, one injury to one of those guys, and I think he's in as a starter.
The surprise of the season, if it's not the Niners, maybe it's the Jaguars. We could certainly talk about them, but the Ravens, dude, mother of God, 1-4. Lamar Jackson is hurt right now. Justice Hill is a really interesting player because of Cooper Rush and because of the Ravens' inability to keep games close lately. I think that Derrick Henry, you could make the case that his skill set is taken out of the games, especially in this Texans game, where the Texans get up big early. You don't see a whole lot of Derrick Henry. So we did see Justice Hill. We also saw Keaton Mitchell in this game as well. I'm totally fine with keeping Justice Hill on your team right now in case something happens to Derrick Henry. But the fact that the Ravens, it looks like a down year for them right now, this opens up some more possibilities for Hill to get into the game. And now I think until this Ravens defense gets healthy, we have to kind of look at Justice Hill on a week-to-week basis to see, like, hey, maybe this is a Hill week. Maybe this is a game that the Ravens get down, which is something we hadn't done in the past. Do you think that we'll have a general idea, knowing that, that this could be a Hill at the flex position week for us in fantasy? Or are we still kind of getting too cute and playing a guessing game if we try to get that finite with it?
I think it's tough anytime you have to, guess the game script and what they're going to do. But no, I agree. I've always, it seems like every year I have a team where I have Justice Hill, or I've always liked him as a player. The only thing that concerns me a little bit was, 2 weeks ago when he had the big game, he had that 71-yard, he had 74 yards rushing, but that one was a 71-yard touchdown. So he only had 3 carries. And then I think he only caught a couple balls too. That week as well, other than the touchdown that he caught. So, it was kind of, he put up huge numbers, but if you really look into the stats, he didn't get as many opportunities. He just really took advantage of them. And then, so I was kind of waiting to see, thinking in the Rams this week would be a great team, because the way Baltimore's been playing, they'll probably get blown out again, or there's certainly the potential there. And it seems like when that happens, he comes in and, catches more balls. And, the only thing that made me a little bit nervous was his snap counts had been like 51%, 59, and he was down to 30 last week. And Keaton Mitchell came in and got 3 carries and a target. So I still think Hill has a definite role there. And I think in the games that Baltimore gets blown up, it's a great opportunity to take advantage of that. So I still see him as, as some of these bye weeks go on and you're a little short at runner, you can plug him in as an RB2 or something. I can see to get by a week possibly, but it is tough. But I think you can kind of foresee a little bit with some of the matchups. And if they are going to, if you feel they're going to get blown out, then it's probably not a bad week to play them.
You mentioned it. The Ravens are 7.5-point underdogs at home to the Rams this week. And if you are looking for a flex, we will have no Nico Collins, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, Jordan Mason, Nick Chubb, Woody Marks. They're all on bye this week. TJ Hawkinson is another one too. So I think here's the thing. I think if you were ever going to flex out, and I can't believe we're talking about this, but this is where we're at in fantasy right now. If you're ever going to flex him out, I think it's got to be this week, because if you look at his schedule going forward, after this week, they go on the bye. So obviously you're not playing in week 7. And then Lamar Jackson expected to be back for week 8. They go with the Bears at home, at the Dolphins, those next 2 games. And then they go to Minnesota and to Cleveland, which I think if Jackson's healthy in those games, those are probably more Derrick Henry games. And then you don't really have a potential Justice Hill game but it's on the flip side of it where it could be a blowout with the Jets, but the wrong way blowout, which might be a Henry grinding game too. So I think week 7 is your best bet, and then you keep him around just in case Henry was to go down, and then you have Hill to come in for him in your flex spot for sure. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, on the other hand, is not a guy that relies on contingent upside. This past week, he had his breakout week of the season for the 7th round rookie that is taking over the Commanders' backfield. Not a whole lot going on the first few weeks. He does get a touchdown in weeks 1 and 3, but then week 5, he ends up getting 111 rushing yards. He gets 2 touchdowns on the ground, puts up 28 points, which, by the way, is still his 3rd double-digit FFPC fantasy point performance of the season. So it's not like he's been bad. And I think Pro Football Focus had this before the game against the Chargers last week, that he was the most efficient running back in the NFL, which is kind of crazy to think about. But after a performance like this, I would never ask you this, Larry, if it wasn't for the Woody Marks effect, because Woody Marks, I was talking to people last week and they said, oh, the change has already been made. Marks owns that backfield in Houston. And then we saw what happened last week. Not so fast, my friend. Nick Chubb had a lot to say about that. And it certainly wasn't the Woody Marks backfield. So I'm asking you this now, knowing what we saw in Houston, can we safely anoint Krosky-Merritt as the guy in Washington, or do you need to see more from him yet?
In my opinion, he should be the guy. I love the kid. I think he's very talented. I actually drafted him in both varsity leagues. Wish I'd have gotten him in a main or two.
Right.
And my friends around here locally are probably getting tired of hearing me complain about it, because I'm not the hugest Cliff Kingsbury guy. And I'm like, would you give that kid the ball? He is, I mean, you've got Chris Rodriguez and, oh God, the pass catcher there. I can't think of his name right now.
Oh, why am I drawing a blank on it now too? People help us out in the chat. It was Chris Rodriguez, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, and Jeremy McNichols.
Thank you. I mean, Jeremy McNichol, career backup. Chris Rodriguez, for the years he's been in, I don't think there's any comparison in talent. He is one of the guys that I really put a lot of time into researching before the drafts. And I'm sure you're aware, like that his season at New Mexico was just amazing. He had like 1,200 yards, 17 touchdowns, average 6.3. And then are you familiar with the situation at Arizona? What happened to him?
It was an NCAA thing that kind of prevented him from playing, like some sort of paperwork or some like loophole that it wasn't like an off-field, character thing for him. It was a matter of a rule stipulation that kept him away from the field.
Exactly. And I haven't figured out exactly what it was. I know there was something with like a redshirt year and the COVID year, and I think he thought he had eligibility and didn't, but he went to Arizona and played one game and had like, I think 13 carries for 106 yards, and he averaged like 8.2 a carry and lost his eligibility. So he was done. So I think that's the only reason he fell to the 7th round to Washington this year, is there just wasn't any recent information on him because he didn't play last year. But looking at, and at Alabama State, he wasn't any kind of superstar or anything like that. But boy, that year at New Mexico, he's so quick in space. The one thing that surprised me, obviously, he's not anywhere near he's a very different back than Genty, but like his contact balance, I see similarities in it. I mean, he's hard to bring down, and he's much smaller. So I think he's got a lot going for him, and we'll see. I guess if Washington's ready to turn it over to him, I don't know if it's being a rookie and drafted later, if that had something to do with it. But talent wise, I think he is by far the best back on that roster, and hopefully they start giving him 18, 20 touches a game. I think he'll be a top 20 back for sure, but probably higher than that.
Yeah, I mean, that Jaden Daniels, anytime you have a Jaden Daniels-led offense, certainly that's, rising tide raises all ships, and certainly Krosky-Merritt is one of those ships that's rising. I want to point this out, too. You kind of touched on this. He played one game in Arizona, one game in 2024, then missed all season when everybody else is playing. Then he plays in the East-West Shrine Bowl, 97 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns, and he's MVP after not playing the whole season. Gives you an idea of how talented he really is.
Yeah.
Want to get into Mason Taylor here. Speaking of rookies, the performance that he had, and I'll say this, and maybe we can weave Theo Johnson into this conversation as well. Steven Yergallo, shout out to him, the guy who was taking Theo Johnson in every best ball I was in with him in the KFFSC. I want to bring up Mason Taylor because in the same way with Theo Johnson, both of these guys had opportunities to be the number 2 target on their team, which I think Scott Barrett from Fantasy Points will tell you that if you want to be successful, if you want to be a fantasy difference maker, you have to at least be a top 2 target on your team. Theo Johnson obviously could be the number 1 target now with no Malik Neighbors, but certainly with Neighbors, he had a chance to be the number 2 target. In New York, as far as the Jets go, Mason Taylor obviously had a chance to be the number 2 target because after Garrett Wilson, there wasn't a whole lot on that team. Now, Taylor, in the first 2 games of the season, combines for 3 total targets. Then in week 3, he sees 6. Week 4, he sees 7. Last week, he gets 12 targets. His catches on the season, if I start with week 1 and we go on, 1 catch, 4, 5, and then this past week, he had 9 catches. Has not gotten in the end zone yet, but certainly 9 for 67 is going to turn into 22.2 fantasy points in the FFPC, and that's really, really good. If we look at this just from a week basis, you go from the Dallas matchup, one of the worst defenses in the NFL. Now you go to one of the perceived best defenses in the NFL in the Denver Broncos. How seriously do you think FFPC players have to look at getting Mason Taylor in their lineups, considering that the matchup is not the greatest, but he's definitely trending in the right direction?
He is, and he's another one that I guess I made a couple poor choices this week. He was one of the last roster decisions I made, and it was where I had a bye week and a couple injuries, and I was thinking about flexing him, and I didn't do it this week, and I just was kicking myself. But like you said, he obviously is the number 2 option there. I think in this Denver game, Denver I think is 11th against the tight end. Their defense, and they have a very solid defense. But with Patrick Surtain on Garrett Wilson, he seems to be able to shut down pretty much most number 1 receivers. So, it would make sense that they would look to Taylor and he would be open more, and it probably would be a good play. But it's just that Denver defense is tough. That's a tough call there. But I would seriously consider him, especially who is going to be matched up. I would assume Surtain would follow Wilson pretty much all day. Yeah, and that's a tough call for anybody. So I think you'd have to consider him.
The Jets and Broncos are the Thursday night game this week. The Broncos are 7.5-point favorites against the Jets. And with a total of 43.5, what are we looking at for like perceived point totals on that? Probably right around 17 for the Jets. So they should score. And maybe this is a positive game script too in the fourth quarter, where if Surtain is locking up Garrett Wilson and the Jets are down by double digits in the late third or fourth quarter, it's going to be a lot of over the middle stuff. It might be Mason Taylor catching 6-yard passes and falling down, but we don't care about that for fantasy. It could work out very nicely for Mason Taylor for those people that start him in week 6.
That 1.5 per reception, like you said, we really don't care, do we?
No, and like last week too. He failed to get 70 receiving yards, but he got 9 catches. That's really the most valuable part of it for sure. Yeah. I beg your pardon. The Broncos and Jets are not the Thursday night game. Thank you, Tom Smith. The Broncos and Jets are the 9:30 a.m. game in London this week. That's what it is. I apologize for that. Eagles and Giants on Thursday night, the Saquon Barkley revenge game. Okay. Speaking of Barkley and those running backs, we have 2 interesting running back situations that have developed because of injury over the last couple of weeks. In London this past week, I beg your pardon, that was in Dublin, where Jaylen Warren missed, and then we had the Kenneth Gainwell game. Steelers are on bye this week, so we have not. And Jaylen Warren, for what it's worth, was working out on Monday practice this week, so he seems like he is. I don't want to say a safe bet, but looks like he's trending in the right direction for playing this week. But Gainwell, in his absence, really played well and got a lot of volume as well. In the same vein, Chuba Hubbard, we kind of found out was trending in the wrong direction last week, and people grabbed Rico Dowdle where he was available. And then when they had him on the roster, and obviously played him on Sunday when they knew Hubbard was not playing, and all Dowdle did was rush for 200 plus yards. Now, I think these situations are similar, but I also think they're a little bit different as well. So when you look at Gainwell and Dowdle, these two guys that were sort of backing up the starters, are they actually flex worthy this week? Because we're not going to have anything to go on other than the last game that both of these players, Gainwell and Dowdle, really excelled in. And I think we kind of have to consider, like, this could be a 1A and 1B situation in both of these spots. I mean, I think worst case scenario for Warren and Hubbard, it's 1A and 1B, but maybe Gainwell and Dowdle go back to just being I don't know, because anything could happen here. How would you handle these guys when you look at your lineups? Not necessarily Hubbard and Warren, but if they are healthy, what do you do with Gainwell? What do you do with Dowdle?
I would agree. I think they both have a role. I think they are similar, but I agree there are some differences. The first one with Gainwell, I don't mean to bash all the OCs and whatnot, but Arthur Smith is one I really don't care for. It's hard to predict what he's going to do, but he has always liked to play two runners. Mm-hmm. And I think I was very high on Warren. And I think he probably will be back also. But I could see, I think there's going to be a role for him there. I think they're going to split it up, whether it's 60-40 or 70-30. I think there's definitely a role there. And then with Rico Dowdle, I mean, my goodness, after that performance, given it was against Miami, but how can he not get another opportunity? And it sounds like Chuba has been a little dinged up, and I think they might want to ease him back. I think especially immediately, Dowdle stands a very good chance to keep a steady role, and I think if he performs, I could see that moving forward into a 1A and 1B for the rest of the year as well.
I think that Carolina is smart enough to understand that what Dowdle did was against a really bad defense. At the same time, they can't, just from a football standpoint, from a locker room standpoint, from a player standpoint, you can't really not reward Dowdle with after his performance. Like, you still have to give him the ball, even if Hubbard's your guy. Now, to your point, I think that Hubbard might still be more likely to miss this week than not. So you might get another game for Dowdle this week. And Carolina is going to be
a revenge game
at Dallas. Yeah, the Rico Dowdle revenge game live in North Carolina when the Cowboys come visit. So certainly that I think that will play in the mind of Dave Canales and Rico Dowdle there. To your point, or excuse me, to Tom Smith's point, I'll bring this up as he's watching us on YouTube. Pittsburgh, granted, they are coming off the bye, but they are playing the Browns this week. And obviously the Browns defense has been pretty good this year, maybe tough sledding for Gainwell, but he caught passes too. That's the other thing. It's like there's some value in these guys here. You never root for injury, but certainly I would be rooting for the Panthers to maybe give Hubbard one more week where we can get Dowdle as the bell cow in that offense. And certainly I think Warren's going to be back, and I feel okay about flexing him out. Probably not a guy ideally I want to put at my second running back this week. And Gainwell, I think if Warren plays against a tough defense like that, I think you want to break ties in your lineup against him. But I get it if you have to play him. So maybe you had Omari and Hampton, and you got to fill that spot because is on injured reserve right after we're not celebrating the Najee Harris injury, but the silver lining of that gray cloud was you get Omari and Hampton being the bell cow, basically having this backfield, not to himself, but at least the line share the touches to himself. Now he's in a walking boot out for at least 4 weeks. So when people are looking, Larry, at trying to not replace Hampton, but at least replace his spot on their roster to get a Chargers running back in there. Are you team Hassan Haskins? Is that the guy that you want to roster? Or would you rather roster Kamani Vidal? Vidal's interesting because he basically was on the practice squad all season. He got elevated this past game, and Haskins was the guy in front of him. But I think, just looking at the types of running backs that these guys are, Vidal is the more exciting start. He's the more, I don't want to use the term explosive, but he's certainly more of an exciting start than Haskins. But he may get fewer touches than Haskins. This is a difficult decision for people who may only have one roster spot to play with. And if you got to pick between Haskins or Vidal, which way would you be going?
I think that is an extremely difficult decision. I would agree. It seems like Vidal has maybe a little more juice. Seems a little bit more exciting. But Haskins, I mean, I had Hampton on a team, of course, and I actually did I had picked up Haskins because it seemed like he was the handcuff, and I had an extra spot. It wasn't like a real secure handcuff that I was crazy interested in, but I did add him. I don't know if he's going to be the guy or not. He has that connection with Harbaugh from Michigan, so I think he's probably trusted a little bit more. But it does seem like, like we said, Vidal has a little more juice and probably a little bit more upside. So I guess if I had to pick, I would probably pick Vidal. But I don't think I would want to use either one of them that much past this week against Miami just because they're so poor. And I really think that until Hampton comes back, I think they're going to rely on Herbert and they're going to throw it more. And the other thing, I guess, I wouldn't rule out them possibly bringing in another back.
Yes.
I think that's a possibility too. So I wouldn't go crazy on the wire for either one of them. I guess Vidal would be the one that I think has probably the most upside, but it's one I think is a kind of a coin toss.
You alluded to a couple of the points that I'm glad you made them too. Jim Harbaugh, I'm going to paraphrase here, but he made some comment after the game that leads you to believe that they were also going to explore options outside of the organization.
Oh, I hadn't heard anything.
It wasn't. He didn't explicitly say that, but I mean, if you read between the lines, you could kind of tell, like, hey, we're not saying we're standing pat or anything like that. Last week, Haskins 1 catch for 2 yards, Vidal 1 catch for 1 yard. So really non-existent in the pass game for both of them. And then Haskins 5 carries, 13 yards. Kamani Vidal 4 for 18, which is a better, I guess, average, but it's such a small sample. The other thing to consider is something that you brought up with Herbert. The Chargers looked really, really good in their first few games of the season because they were throwing Quentin Johnston the ball. They were throwing Keenan Allen the ball. Ladd McConkey still obviously getting involved. They kind of went away from that a little bit in this past game. A loss, a 17-point home loss to Washington. And, I think that Harbaugh and Roman have really surprised me with how much they've embraced the passing game so far this season. I think they're both smart enough to realize, like, not only are we down Najee Harris and Omari and Hampton, we're down our starting 2 tackles as well. So there's something to be said about, formulating a game plan around your best playmakers. And that could just be, Gadsden and Montgomery and Allen underneath with Quentin Johnston stretching the field. That might be your best plan of attack to try to win games. So when you consider, when you're and I'm speaking to the FFPC players here, when you're making your bids regarding Vidal and Haskins, not only do you have to consider that neither one of these guys is clearly the most talented running back in the world, they may go with a passing heavy attack, and they also may acquire somebody else via trade or off somebody else's practice squad or off the waiver wire. So I think bid with caution with those 2 guys. I would not go crazy on that. Tom Smith believes that he thinks the Chargers actually signed Nyheim Hines already today, which if it happened, I didn't see it, but that's another guy too that is really going to, if they did sign Hines, I mean, that guy is a pass catcher through and through, and that's really going to cap the upside of both Vidal and Haskins if neither one of them is on the field on third down too. So there's your all-encompassing look at the Chargers' third-string running back situation. Let's talk about the starting running back and the backup running back in Tennessee, because Tyjae Spears missed the first 4 games of the season. He is back off of IR, and he was actually playing in the game. Tony Pollard had a 73% snap rate this past week, which was a season low for him, but it still was 73%, which I think is pretty solid. How much of an impact do you think that Spears is going to have on Tony Pollard's volume? And what does that mean for fantasy, given the fact that if it wasn't for a couple of miracle bonehead decisions by the Arizona Cardinals this past week, Tennessee would be heading into this game still this week, still without a win and still with that offense not looking very good.
Wasn't that awful? I guess first of all, that's just, oh my gosh, that might be the craziest ending to a game I've ever seen. That was just amazing. But, with Spears, I think the whole issue with him has always been, can he stay healthy? Mm-hmm. I mean, all the way back to when he was running with when Derrick Henry was there. And I think that his rookie year, if I remember correctly, his average yards per carry, they were very close. And he was actually out rushing Henry sometimes. I mean, he's very explosive. Of course, that was a different regime in charge there. But I have heard comments that they want to try to get Spears involved and make it more of a committee. I think he got 25% of the snaps this week. Only 4 for 14. They didn't throw him the ball at all. He didn't have any targets. But with his first game back, I'm sure they were trying to ease him in. But I think they like him and are going to try. And I would not be surprised to see that eventually turn into like a 60-40. Personally, I feel Spears is more explosive than Pollard, and I think they would like that explosiveness. So I think he's got to prove that he can stay healthy for more than a week or two. But if he does and gets in and starts performing a bit, I could see that becoming a 65-35, 60-40 split between the two.
I remember during drafting season, Sean Siegel and Com Kelly from RotoViz were really pumping up the Tyjae Spears bandwagon to the point where I started targeting him in a few best ball drafts, and then the mid rounds of a couple of managed leagues. And really the injury took the wind out of our sails on that one, and it hurt to lose him for 4 games. Now he's back, and certainly, the other thing to consider is the contingent upside with Spears. If Pollard were to go down, Spears could be an exciting player. I still am comfortably, I think, starting Pollard, especially this week against the Raiders. I mean, I could definitely. I mean, I think that Spears could have some value as a flex this week if the game goes how I think it could go. But certainly, I'm not at this point, as much as I love Spears in the drafting process, I am not down on Pollard yet, but I reserve the right to change my mind as you do as well. One more question before we let you enjoy your Tuesday evening. We've talked about a few waiver wire targets tonight. I know this isn't like a super exciting waiver wire week heading into week 6. Obviously we had some injuries. We only have 2 teams on bye. A lot of people are getting bye players back that they were missing last week. Josh Jacobs, Bijan Robinson, Roma Dunze, Caleb Williams, all those players that were on bye this past week, DK Metcalf, they'll get them back in week 6. If there is a player that you're targeting on the waiver wire this week, who would that player be? And then is there a player that you drafted or maybe you picked up and that you're already saying like, look, I got to wash my hands of this guy. It's just not happening.
Well, I think the waiver wires are interesting. You see, there's all the news of waiver wire pickups for week 6 or whatever week it is. And, you'll see the names on there and it's like, he's not going to be available in the FFPC. It's like those guys have been gone for weeks if they weren't drafted. So, like Mason Taylor, Michael Carter, Dowdle, you're not going to get any of those guys.
And to your point, Larry, I mean, I brought up Kendrick Bourne, who is owned in less than 20% of main event and big gorilla teams. And you already had him on your roster before last week too.
Yeah. So it's, well, and I mean, there's a lot of people. I love the FFPC. There's people in there certainly know their business, and it's hard to pick up those guys. The waiver wires are never as deep, and it's a little bit bigger roster. I think Jalen Coker is another one, probably not in the FFPC, but I think he could be sneaky coming back. He was looking really good until he got hurt. There's going to be obviously the Haskins Vidal debate. I would say, guys, that I'm looking for this week that could have some possibility. It is surprising Theo Johnson is still out there in some leagues.
Tight end premium leagues, and he's still available in some of them. Just
yeah.
Mind.
Yeah, and I mean, he looks like, especially with Dart, looks like he's going to use him as a security blanket, although Bellinger got some catches too. But I think Theo Johnson's the guy. I was a little bit worried about A.J. Barner being touchdown dependent, but it seems like they want to get him a little bit more involved. It's hard with Arroyo there as well, but he would be a consideration. My boy Flournoy from the Cowboys.
Yes. What's the deal with him? I mean, is this for real, or is this a game like just that's the way the game went? That's the way the matchup went for Flournoy.
I think it was. The Jets, the Jets have a weak corner that I thought was going to be on Tolbert, and actually on betting, I had some Tolbert bets, and he did absolutely nothing. And I'm guessing that Flournoy had the matchup, but boy, they sure went to him. He was open all day. I'm not real huge on him though, because Lamb probably, I'd love it if actually I'd almost rather see the CD take another week and come back in week 7 just to make sure. But he'll be back in a couple weeks. Turpin will be back in a couple weeks, and I'm just not sure how much play he's going to get. Kind of like the Kendrick Bourne situation. I think he'll fall back into his role as some of the other guys come back, but he could be a possibility. I guess the other one, if he's out there, you got to consider is the Joe Flacco signing today.
Yeah.
You know, and with him, honestly, watching the last couple of Cleveland games, I've pretty much felt that he's kind of washed, but he's not going to be afraid to throw the ball. And I think for Chase and Higgins, I think he could definitely help them, because I think he could get the ball to him. So that's an interesting one. That could be a possibility.
And Larry, I'll tell you this too. I think Chase and Higgins can help out Flacco quite a bit.
Oh yeah.
He gets the upgrade from, Jerry Jeudy and Harold Fannin and Isaiah Bond, and you get to throw to Higgins and Chase right now. I mean, I think that could be mutually beneficial for all parties. Now,
absolutely.
If you look at the game this week, I think the Packers are still like a 14-point favorite or something. So you're not necessarily moving the needle with anything this week. But going forward, if those guys develop some chemistry, this could be the thing that maybe saves Jamar Chase as still a relevant guy every single week that you want in your lineup. And maybe you're starting Higgins more often than not with Flacco. Again, Flacco he's past his prime. I understand he's not like, it's not like John Elway or Dan Marino rolling in there or anything like that. But I do think it's a significant upgrade. And I think in the same way Flacco helps Chase and Higgins, they're going to help him out a lot as well.
That's a good point. That is a good point. I would agree. The only thing that I was going to mention that does make me a little nervous about it is that Cincinnati offensive line is still so bad. Yeah. And Flacco is, with his mobility, that makes me a little bit nervous if he's going to be able to move around. I guess the other thing I would say about it, I was keeping an eye on it, and I don't have it in front of me right now, but losing Burrow, I did have Jake Browning, and looking at their schedule, I believe it starts like in week 7, but 7 or 8, there's a stretch of like 3 or 4 games where they have some easier opponents. And, if he's getting acclimated there, I think they could put up some numbers against some of those teams.
The Bengals, and I was the biggest Jake Browning apologist out there, because I remember what he did in 2023, and I thought it was pretty good, and then he comes in, he gets the Vikings in England. Was that in England? Yeah, it was, right? Bengals Vikings, or am I making that up? No, that was the week before. I'm sorry. This was in Minnesota. So even worse. And then he goes to Denver, which is not the easiest matchup. Detroit, I know they've been missing some defenders here, but that's a tough defense as well. So it's like Browning really didn't get any easy matchups.
No, he didn't.
You mentioned it now too. Cincinnati at Green Bay, and then the Steelers next week. But then you get the Jets, the Bears, the Steelers again, the Patriots, the Ravens. God knows what kind of shape they're going to be in. And then you also have dates on the rest of the schedule, including the Dolphins, Cardinals, and Browns. So certainly that it does lighten up towards the end of the season for Cincinnati. One other thing, I meant to bring this up when you're talking about the Seattle tight ends. I just looked at the ownership. You think about AJ Barner's usage and how much Sam Darnold's been throwing to him. Barner owned in 21% and 16% of main event and big gorilla leagues, respectively. Arroyo, 46% and 44%. So he's actually owned in double the leagues that Barner is. And Barner's actually been the more productive player, too, the more productive tight end in Seattle. So that's something to be keeping an eye on. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Anybody you're looking to get rid of this week that you're saying, I'm going to let somebody else deal with it because I'm done with it?
I don't really have anybody at this point. Maybe Calvin Ridley before last week.
Last week, absolutely, yeah.
But I mean, any of the guys that aren't performing, and I guess that's kind of my point about with these waivers too. I think this is a good time of year where I'll go through, just because there's not a lot of great talent left in the FFPC waivers typically, but what I'll do is go through and look at the last week or the weeks before. And at this point in the year is when a lot of owners start to get a little antsy and they maybe drop some people that they shouldn't have just because they're tired of them at this point. I saw somewhere in a league where I believe it happened probably in several leagues where some people did drop Calvin Ridley. And I'm just not, of course, those could be teams with short benches too, maybe only 14-man rosters, but I think you gotta hold those guys a little bit and give them some time. And sometimes you'll find somebody drop that's like, oh, I'll pick them up for a couple weeks. And that's more what I'm looking for with the talent that's out there this week, I would say. I mean, there's a couple guys that we mentioned that I might throw a little bit on, but nobody that I really want to, go throwing 20% or something like that at this point.
Larry, just a start sit question that comes in from our buddy Permar on YouTube, who's hanging out watching us tonight. Wide receiver question, and he wants to know Jameson Williams this week at Kansas City or Matthew Golden at home against the Bengals.
Oh, that's a tough call.
I told him Williams because I just feel like if Golden wasn't going to bust out against Dallas, and he really didn't, I just don't foresee him busting out all of a sudden against Cincinnati. And now that's not to say Jameson Williams has been the apple of my eye either, but I do see more of a higher upside with Williams than Golden at this point, at least for fantasy wise. And I know the matchup's a little bit tougher, but I think I'd rather play Williams over Golden. I got to see it with Golden first.
I think that's a good call. I thought Golden was going to have a huge game against the Cowboys. And really just didn't perform. Williams has been very disappointing this year, but I mean, he's still talented. What are they again? Detroit's playing
at Kansas City.
At Kansas City, and Green Bay's got
they got the Cincinnati
Bengals, right?
Yeah, in Green Bay.
Which, I mean, there's just so many ways they could score, and they have so many options. I wouldn't be surprised to see that Detroit-Kansas City game be kind of a shootout. So I think for that reason, too, I agree with you. I would like Williams.
Yeah, I'm looking at this right now. Green Bay is a 14-point favorite in that game. And with an extra week for the Packers offensive line to heal up a little bit, this could be a big-time Josh Jacobs game. The total on that Lions-Chiefs game is 52.5 right now. Sunday Night Football, that could be a fun one. So yeah, I think that Williams is the right call there. And then one more Packer question from Permar. Who does he roster right now? Christian Watson had his practice window opened up yesterday, trying to come off the PUP list. Would you rather roster him or Jalen Coker, who I also believe had his 21-day practice window open? For me, again, I'm kind of shying away from the Packers receivers because I just don't know how to treat them in managed leagues going forward. I just don't know when it's their week. Whereas Coker, I think that he should have a defined role week in and week out on that roster, which is on the Panthers offense, which is why I'd rather roster Coker than Watson.
I would too. I definitely agree.
Larry, I think that's going to do it here. Great job tonight. Great job on the season so far. Going for another varsity win or a pair of varsity wins, going for $1 million in that FFPC main event, 31st place heading into week 6. Congratulations on a strong start and good luck the rest of the way. We will talk with you again soon. Enjoy this weekend's slate of games and enjoy the rest of the season, man. Always a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Great talking with you.
Good talking with you too, Larry. That is Troy's boys himself, Larry Weinhauer, the two-time FFPC Varsity League champion, 31st place in the FFPC Main Event heading into week 6. And that will complete tonight's RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown episode. Want to let you know to check out the FFPC Weekly Challenge. No draft, no salary cap. Pick 10 players or 12 players if you want to play with kickers and defenses. 1 player per NFL team. So if you want Teteroa McMillan, you can't have Rico Dowdle. If you want Patrick Mahomes, you can't have Xavier Worthy. Win up to $2,500 each week in the FFPC. You can win in 10-team, 30-team, or 100-team leagues. myffpc.com, myffpc.com is where to go for that. Live shows this week, Thursday night on the Better Sports Network. FFPC Insider Access will go live for 2 full hours at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Brian Drake from Fantasy Points and the Fantasy Points podcast, Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio, will be my guest co-host for that, which is going to be great because he is a big-time Eagles fan and will be your second screen as we enjoy the first quarter plus with you on Thursday night for FFPC Insider Access. Friday night, the father and son duo of Greg and Matthew Salter will be my guests, along with co-host Farrell Elliott on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour. That is 10 p.m. Eastern Time on Friday. The Salters began week 5 in 5th place overall, I believe, in the FFPC Main Event. It was the FFPC Main Event or Big Gorilla, and I can't remember, but they're in 5th place in one of them. So they'll be our guests on Friday. This show will go live again next Tuesday night at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. Get a guest booked on that shortly, and I'll be able to tell you who that is hopefully later this week. Remember to check out the FFPC Weekly Challenge. Remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, comment on the video, share it with your friends, share it with your enemies, and get notified each and every time we go live, which will be Thursday night, FFPC Insider Access at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. For Larry Weinhauer, I have been Eric Balkman. This is the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown. Talk with you again next.
Thank you for listening to the High Stakes Lowdown, a RotoViz podcast brought to you by the Fantasy Football Players Championship. And thanks to Grapes for our theme music. Please review the podcast on Apple Podcasts under the RotoViz radio feed. It helps us find new listeners. Contact us via email at rotovizradio@gmail.com. We'd love to hear what you think and connect with us on X at RotoVizRadio. Remember, you can always support the show by subscribing to RotoViz at a 10% discount using the code RVRadio2025. That's RVRADIO2025 through the NFL Podcast homepage at rotoviz.com/podcast.